only one viewer. 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse was a serialized web novel that only had one viewer. That one viewer, RMC, had no idea why no one was interested in such a masterpiece. Total number of episodes: 3149, average view count 1.9, average comment count 1.08. Well, he kind of understood why no one was interested in a web novel that was over 3,000 episodes long. He was the only reader, and it had taken him over 10 years to finally reach the last episode. Hordes of monstrous creatures burst onto the scene, rampaging across the globe. A select few humans stood tall, determined to survive at any cost. A train screeched to a halt, jostling all of its passengers. Everything that was happening was entirely too familiar to the MC. Every moment of this story had been seared into his head. All of the passengers of the train cabin were shocked by the appearance of a little fuzzy goblin with golden horns. As destruction from the heavens shot across the sky, the few lucky survivors watched on, hoping they had what it took to make it to another day. But some were more determined than others to make it to the top of the pile. RMC knew this story in and out. He did his best to avoid a confrontation with the main protagonists he knew so well. But fate wouldn't allow him to coast by in this new world. A showdown between RMC and his MC was unavoidable. He was surprised he was able to hold his own as the two clashed. The protagonists of the web novel sensed his enemy's ability to match each of his moves. He had never come up against someone like this before. He pushed his enemy hard, wondering who the hell he was. The battle between the two was pointless as all their blows countered each other's out. And as the protagonist stared on, wondering how such a mysterious human could exist, RMC smiled on, knowing that things were going to be different this time around. He couldn't believe he had reached the final episode. It had been such a long journey. He was almost too nervous to even open the 3149th episode. But back then he had no idea that on the day he finished the story, that he alone had been reading for the past 10 years would become a reality. And because of that he would become the only person who knew the ending of the world. A select group of survivors stared on at a future that would forever be uncertain. There are 3 ways to survive the apocalypse. Everything is fading and becoming unclear now, but one thing is for certain: if you're reading this, you will survive. The end. He couldn't believe that was it. He frantically swiped through his phone, looking for a true epilogue. But no matter how hard he tried, it seemed that was truly the ending. He sat on the packed train, staring at his phone, stunned by such an outcome. His name was Dokja. In Korea, the name had a few meanings. It could be taken to mean only child, individualist, or reader. He had been given the name by his father, who hoped he would become a strong and independent individual. But instead of becoming the blessing his father had hoped, it only served as a curse. Besides the problems it caused him when introducing himself to new people, he also seemed destined to be lonely and single his entire life. In a nutshell, this is who RMC Dokja is. His name is Dokja Kim. He's 28 years old and graduated from a third-rate college. He is currently employed as a contractor at a subsidiary of a large corporation. You could say his hobby is reading serialized web novels on his subway commutes to and from work. But on this particular commute, everything changed. If you stare at it any harder, your phone's going to suck you in. He looked up surprised. He was hardly ever confronted while riding the subway. But a familiar face stared down at him. It was Sang-yu from HR. She began chatting with him, and luckily the nice soul sitting next to him got up to make room for her. Today was a rare day for her as her team manager was away on a business trip, allowing her to get out of the office much earlier than usual. Dokja couldn't believe he had ran into Sanga, the most popular girl at work, and her shampoos smelled so nice. There was no way she normally commuted by subway. She had to have a long line of admirers willing to give her a ride anywhere. She admitted that the subway wasn't her normal mode of transportation. But she had found that someone had stolen her bike on her way home from work today. Dokja couldn't believe she rode a bike to and from work. She admitted it was strange, but since she had been working so much overtime, it gave her a good excuse to get exercise in. He could understand exactly why she held a spell over all the guys at work. But he didn't concern himself with such things. Their lives were on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And if you were wondering, no, she's not the reason today's subway ride is different than normal. Here she was, learning Spanish on her commute, while he was spending his time reading a web novel. She truly was a different breed. He was way too embarrassed to show her what he was reading. But in such a situation, it's not like he could truly keep it from her. He was essentially studying the Korean language. Her finding out he was reading a novel didn't help things much. It turned out she was a big book nerd. With her favorite authors being Raymond Carver and Murakami Haruki, she probably would have went on for days if she wasn't trying her best to get Doctor to engage in the conversation. There was no way he could tell her who his favorite author was, and it wasn't like she would recognize the name of a web novelist. But after all, it was his hobby. Even if it was a hobby, he couldn't be proud of in public. But what made this day different than any other was the ending of a lifelong obsession. 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, or TWSA for short, had been there through all his rough years. You could only imagine how special something like that is. Ever since he started reading it in the 8th grade. It was there when he was hiding from the bullies at school. And when he failed his entrance exams, and the only college he could get into was the third-rate one. 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse was there for him. It was even there when bad luck got him stranded on the front lines during his compulsory military service. All the way up to this day where he was a contract worker getting transferred from company to company, TWSA was there for him. To think he truly didn't possess any happy memories. But this day was bittersweet. A world that meant so much to him was finally getting its epilogue. A grand series that spanned 3,149 episodes. He really couldn't believe he had stuck in there this long. And moreover, he couldn't believe the author continued when there was only one reader. Things hadn't started out with an average view count of 1. The first few chapters had gotten a bit of attention, but all that attention soon dried up. And by chapter 50, only he remained. TWSA was a story written for him and only for him. Being as poor as he was, a comment was the best he could do to thank the author who had gotten him through so many rough patches in his life. Dokja had tried on numerous occasions to recommend his favorite story to multiple people. But such encounters always seemed to head in the same direction, of people believing he was attention-seeking for a story that he had written himself. He had gotten lost in his phone again and forgot he had company on this commute. As he turned towards her, she stared him down, causing him to bring up the first subject he could squeeze out of his mind. The two of them have been working for this company for over a year. It worked. She picked up the conversation. Neither of them had any idea what they were getting into with this job. But all the hard work she put in had finally paid off, leading to her getting a full-time position at the company. Seeing as how he never congratulated her on her success, he took this opportunity to do so. Maybe if he spent his time learning a foreign language, he would be blazing the trail of success also. In a way, she was everything he wished he could be. If the two of them were characters in the novel, she would definitely be the heroine. Where he hardly tried, she gave it her all. When he was wasting his time reading web novels, she was learning the Spanish language. So her becoming a full-time employee wasn't really a shock to him. And here she was, being timid, trying to help him succeed also. She offered to give him the name of the app that she used to help improve herself. But he knew that the only way things would have been different, or could have been different, was if he was born into a world that wasn't nonfiction. If he had been born into a world of fantasy, he knew he could have been the protagonist. He assured her it was fine. Even if she gave him the name of the app, it wouldn't matter. In this world, he wasn't the protagonist, he was the reader, and nothing would ever change that. He explained to her that he had to live his own life. His words hit her hard. She wished she was capable of living such a life. Going forward, she would take his words to heart. Luckily, she got lost in thought, planning how she was going to live her life moving forward. He was just thankful her revelation gave him a moment to himself. Her accompanying him on his commute wasn't the only oddity of the day. He also received a message from the author of TWSA. The author wanted to thank him for staying loyal through the long haul. It was because of Dakja that he was able to finish his story and win a prize in a contest. He gave his congratulations to TLS 123 success and inquired about the contest. He knew it was highly unlikely that it was a big contest, but he was interested all the same. His author confirmed his suspicions to be true. And in the most shocking turn of events, he was informed that the series was going to become paid content very soon. Starting today, all 3,149 chapters would be placed behind a paywall. The author wanted to pass on a token of his gratitude. He had a little gift for Dakja and needed his email address to send it. It was entirely because of him that the story was even able to be published. It was all just too much information for him to process. First, his author had won a contest, which he was most likely too embarrassed to reveal the full extent of. And now he was going to begin the gift for his dedication. With how low his funds were in his wallet, he hoped he was being given a gift card. Within seconds of sending over his email, he had received his prize. To Mr. Dakja Kim, starting at 7 p.m. today, TWSA will become paid content. I truly wish you all the best and hope this will help you in your future journey. It was 6:55 p.m. at the moment, leaving him with only 5 minutes to say goodbye to TWSA forever. But to his surprise, he was already too late. His favorite series had been scrubbed clean from the internet, leaving him puzzled as he had no idea it was even possible. And at that very moment, the train was plunged into darkness. All the passengers were jostled around as the emergency brakes were activated. This was only the beginning of the horrors the world was about to experience. All this was happening at the exact moment his clock ticked over to 7 p.m. The absurdity of it all was unbelievable. He had no idea why the thought that the paid content was beginning popped into his head. The train conductor was cut off in the middle of giving an evacuation order. As Sangha was easing into panic, Dakja was calmly processing the situation. All of this seemed so familiar. A flash of red lightning ripped through the train cabin. The free service of the 8612th planetary system has come to an end. The main scenario will begin now. This was the very moment that nonfiction ceased to be the genre of his life. To Dakja, it was like a movie was playing out all around him. As he watched on, the lines of the movie forced themselves into his head. The train came to a sudden halt in the bowels of the subway, and the entire cabin grew dark. The train coming to a sudden stop wasn't a big deal. Things like this happen all the time. This wasn't a terrorist attack. There was no reason for him to overreact. But somebody pointing out that a dakibi had appeared was a whole other matter that forced him to come to the reality of things. Dakibis are mythical beings of Korean folklore that captivate the imagination with their extraordinary powers and enigmatic nature. Often referred to as Korean goblins, these divine spirits embody a unique blend of supernatural abilities, allowing them to forge intricate connections with humanity. They exhibit a mischievous inclination, delighting in playful pranks, while also embracing their benevolent side by offering assistance when needed. The author had painstakingly described the little creatures to a T, leaving it hard for Dakja not to believe what he saw was indeed real. They had 2 small horns upon their head. A downy creature wearing a straw garment was floating in mid-air. It was too peculiar to be called a fairy, too malicious to be called an angel, and too innocent-looking to be called a devil, leaving only one possibility for its identity. The dakibi hovered in midair before the passengers of the train. Dakja stared on as fiction and reality overlapped before his very eyes. The little creature was like a radio receiver running through multiple languages trying to find the right one. Only one person on the train knew what was going on. The other speculations ran the gambit from this being a promotion for an augmented reality game, to just pure disgust at how ugly the thing was. A creature very similar had appeared in the opening paragraph of 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, heralding a tragedy that would take place over the course of thousands of chapters. Sangha's Spanish studies was finally seeing some use. She could understand the little creature, and was wondering if she should attempt contact. But Doctor insisted it made more sense to sit back and watch before attempting anything. Testing. Testing. Can everyone hear me? Gosh, the language patch was malfunctioning for a bit. Can everyone hear me now? An impatient individual interrupted the Dakibi's speech. He was in a hurry and wasn't interested in being a part of whatever this was. Oh, you have plans at this hour? Huh. I guess I should have done more research. They told me I would have the most customers if we put up the paywall at around 7 p.m. But he doubted anything he said made sense to the humans. The Dakibi was being very polite to the humans. He just wanted to calmly explain what was going on. But the train passengers wasn't having any of it. They argued and shouted, giving the Dakibi no room to talk. Dr. Experience allowed him to warn Sangha to remain as still as possible. The little creature was starting to tire of the human beings. The cuteness that he once possessed was burned away in an instant, as he began to put on a display that would show everyone who was in charge here. This isn't some movie set, nor is it a dream or a novel. And this certainly isn't the reality that you are all familiar with. Is that understood? As Doctor watched the scene unfold exactly as he predicted, all his doubts and disbeliefs faded away. Up until this point, all of you have had quite a cushy life. Haven't you? Going forward, there will be no more misunderstandings from the passengers. They gave him their full, undivided attention. You were able to breathe, eat, excrete, and reproduce without paying the costs. You've all enjoyed a very privileged life. But that's all over. As you all know, nothing is ever free in life. The passengers were beginning to understand their plight as a rich businessman decided to step forward and fix things. His name was Mr. Han, and he was part of the financial team at the very same business Dr. and Sangha was employed. Everyone at the company knew he had certain connections that the company felt were useful. He attempted to buy his freedom. For him, money wasn't a problem. He was willing to hand over as much as it took. The Dakibi was definitely into trading favors for wealth. The only problem was human currency was useless. It was only valid within the confines of their previous space-time. That paper has no value in the macroscopic dimension. This is a warning. If you ever pull a stunt like this again, I will remove your head. He said all this while setting the useless paper in the businessman's hands aflame. There's no time for all this chit-chat. Your debt is piling up as we speak. I'll refrain from explaining it to you, as it will be faster for you to just dive right in and try to earn money for yourselves. The placeholder swooped across the room as his golden horns grew in length. Channel number BI7623 has opened. The constellations are now making their entrance. The show was finally starting as dings ringed out across the train cart. Everyone was given their system interface. Doctor stared on at the invitation to the main scenario. Main scenario number 1. A system screen popped up with precise instructions informing them that they were all to prove their value. They were tasked with each killing one or more living organisms. Category: Main. Difficulty: F. Time limit: 30 minutes. Reward: 300 coins. Penalty for failure: death. The Dakibi wished them all luck, and reminded them he expected to see a good show, as he disappeared in a flash of white light, leaving them to their task. It was obvious that everyone aboard this train car was having a hard time adjusting to this reality. Doctor did his best to keep Sangha calm. He tried to explain the situation as simply as he could, in terms she understood. Their company was developing a post-apocalyptic survival game where only a handful of people survived. He was pretty sure she had the opportunity to test the game. He explained that she would be best served thinking of this as if it was that game. They were both characters in that game world. Every game had rules. If they figured out the rules, they would be safe no matter what. His explanation seemed to do the trick as her terror seemed to subside. He searched the train car looking for the key that would get them out of this situation. The Dakibi who was in charge of their train car had long golden horns, just like antennas. The ground was littered with people who hadn't been so lucky. The remaining passengers were mostly trembling office workers covered in blood. as a little old lady prayed without any care for her surroundings. Even now, he had a hard time believing this was real. But if he was going to survive, he had to get past it. He couldn't deny it any longer. He had to admit that the story he had been reading for 10 years was coming to life right before his eyes. It was time for him to get into gear. He had a 10-year advantage on everyone else. A path to survival was at his fingertips. He just needed to reach out and claim it. He carefully went over the rules of the scenario, combing it for anything he may have missed. When somebody finally decided to step up and take control of the situation, he insisted everyone needed to calm down and take a deep breath. Once he had their attention, he explained that in a national emergency like this, it only took a small commotion to lead to catastrophic results. So from this point on, he would be in charge. Before the passengers could get upset about someone attempting to seize control, he whipped out his credentials. He was an Army lieutenant currently in active duty with the Unit 6502. Dokja stared on with his mouth agape as if he had seen a ghost. As the lieutenant explained to the rest of the passengers what was going on in the outside world, all military personnel was being ordered to report to their units immediately. Being the leader only funneled the panic of the civilians in his direction. An entitled passenger wanted him to contact the Blue House immediately and inform the president. The surprise for Dokja wasn't that this had turned into a national emergency. Lieutenant Hyeon-seong Lee was a name he knew very well. Steel Blade, Hyeon-seong Lee, Republic of Korea, Army Lieutenant. He was one of the supporting characters in TWSA. Everything about him was the same, the way he acted and talked was spot on. The only problem Dokja could think of was this was not the way he was introduced in the original story. He was certain Lieutenant Lee was introduced after the completion of the first scenario. If the story hadn't been locked behind a paywall, he wouldn't be having this problem. If he had access to it, he could confirm key points he needed to build his plan. Everyone was being informed that an emergency broadcast was being pushed out everywhere. The Prime Minister was informing the populace that there had been an unidentified terrorist attack. The attack was orchestrated all across the country. He assured them that the government would combat the attacks using all means available to them. Even this happened in the story. It will be an easier pill for everybody to believe that a terrorist organization had orchestrated an attack across the whole country. But now that he was actually hearing it with his own ears, it sounded so ridiculous. It didn't take the passengers long to realize that if the Prime Minister was making a speech, the President was already dead. But others believed it to be a baseless rumor that was dangerous to be spread around. But Dokja knew the rumors weren't groundless in the least. And soon a harsh reality would play out before the eyes of the entire nation. The horror hit everyone at the same time. The Prime Minister was taken out in front of everyone else. As the broadcast experienced technical difficulties, a Dakibi could be seen explaining that he had already warned all of them. With a monstrous face, he turned to the camera and explained that terrorism was a joke that his actions shouldn't be confused with. I guess you still don't get it, do you? No, this won't do. Do you all believe we're playing a game right now? Maybe that's exactly what you need. The research did say people of this country was fond of games. Then how about we raise the difficulty? Before all of their eyes, their time limit for the main scenario began to tick faster and faster until the remaining time reached 10 minutes. The Dakibi was so thorough that the time limit even updated in their scenario system window. And he wasn't done there. As an added penalty for their disobedience, if the first death didn't occur in the next 5 minutes, every living organism in the cabin would be terminated. The passengers on the train were furious. As they all turned their attention to Lieutenant Lee, he insisted they had to remain calm. Even though everything was going exactly as he remembered, Dokja had a bad feeling that something wasn't right. If Hyeon-seong Lee, a supporting character, had appeared, then why hadn't the most important person in the story shown his face? Every fiber of his being was telling him that now was the exact time that the main character was revealed in the story. And right on cue, a commotion erupted in the next train car over. One of the passengers rushed to secure their train car from intruders. But there was no need for him to worry. The Dakibi had already took care of it in the form of a force field that surrounded all of the train cars. His action only forced a system message that informed everyone that no one was allowed to leave until the scenario was complete. The demonic little creature was sitting back on live television, enjoying the show. It looks like some cabins are getting interesting, while others are merely a disappointment. Fine, I'll give you a little jolt to get the ball rolling. How about I show you what will happen if you don't do anything in the next 5 minutes? Somewhere in Korea at an all-girls high school, the students hadn't taken his warning seriously. Not one had accomplished their goal before the time had ran out. So, the checkout of all the students began. The room was thrown into complete chaos, as everyone watched on from around the nation. The girls foolishly thought they could escape the horrors that was heading in their direction. The viewers watched on, helpless and horrified at what was happening to their children. That was until the cameras panned to a horrifying situation. A single girl had decided that today wasn't her day. She grabbed the closest living student and slowly strangled the life out of her. Everybody watched on, shocked at what they witnessed. The girl slowly calmed down. As we moved in, a close-up shot of her face was transmitted to everyone watching the emergency broadcast. She was the survivor of channel number Bay23515. Her name was Jae Lee. She was a second-year student of Class B at Taepyeong Girls High School. I doubt she has to worry about her fame for long, for if things continued as it is, all survivors will be in her same position. What do you think? Fun, right? The broadcast had its intended purpose as everyone on the train backed away from their fellow passengers. Dokja was sure not many of these people were going to be capable of surviving the next few minutes. Even Sangha was cautious in Dokja's presence. But he paid her no mind. He was more interested in the main character of TWSA's absence. If all the events he was familiar with were happening in their appropriate order, the main character should be here. As he stared blankly at the empty website where his story should be, a spark went off in his head. He had never opened the Arthur's gift, and right now there was only one thing he wanted. As he opened the email, there was a single attachment. And the words he was hoping for popped up on the screen. 3 ways to survive the apocalypse. He stared at his phone in pure shock. At the moment, he really couldn't care if receiving such a file was illegal. It did come from the author, so it should be okay. And then he realized how foolish such thoughts were in the current state of the world. As he stared at the file, a system pop-up informed him that he had received an exclusive attribute. And the skills slot had been unlocked. It seemed the author had sent him more than just a simple text file. Each of the survivors of TWSA received a special attribute and a skill that was linked to that attribute. If it was just like a game, he should be able to command his attribute window to appear. But he received a message stating that such a window could not be opened. Regardless of how often he tried, they remained the same. It was a mystery he would have to put to the side for a moment. First, he needed information that would allow him to complete his plans. As he opened the file, he realized. The reason he wasn't able to access his attributes was a simple one. He hadn't activated his skill yet. Your attribute has been activated. You are now able to read at a faster speed. His eyes didn't blink as the words on the page zoomed by. Even though he felt such an attribute was lacking, the ability to speedily process the information he needed to save his life was invaluable. Because of his new attribute, he was able to attain the answer he needed in the blink of an eye. Or not the blink of an eye. The cabin number where the original story took place was 3707, and he was in cabin 3807. The reason things were slightly off was because he was one cabin over. The main protagonist was in the cabin where the action started early. The story only gave him a few clues to what happened to the people in 3807. As he took in his surroundings, the chaos was starting to unfold. He realized it was probably too late for all of them. Only 2 people would survive in cabin 3807. A white-haired edgelord was starting the dirty task that had to be done. He was tired of hearing the ramblings of a certain individual. The edgelord laid down a blow that caused serious damage. Dokjin knew exactly who those 2 people were. He wasn't playing around. If this person wouldn't shut up, he would beat them until they did. What did any of it matter? It was highly likely that Sangha was going to die. Except for the 2 people mentioned in the book, everyone in 3807 would perish. That even included him. The whole time, blows were being levied against the individual, until the sleazy businessman had had enough. No matter how bad things got, he had been taught to respect his elders. Mr. Han wasn't going to allow this kid to just do what he pleased. The edgelord couldn't understand why everybody was so dense. Were they all blind? Were they not capable of seeing the reality right in front of their faces? No one was coming to save them. They were the only ones who could choose the future. That meant they had to pick who lived and who died. He understood their feelings well. How could any of them sacrifice others so that they would survive? Were they nothing more than animals? He would normally agree with them, but they were in that do-or-die situation right now. Life moving forward would be kill or be killed. Everyone who survived this day would be guilty of murder. Everyone who survived this day would have done what it took to move on in this new world. The new rules of this new world were being written as they spoke. The edgelord was none other than Namwon Kim. He was one of the few who had dived into this world head first, hitting the ground running. His actions was the catalyst that released the inhibitions of all the others. People like him destroyed the sense of morality that was binding them all together as a society. And the few who stood back and refused to take actions were in themselves accomplices of such wrongdoings. Watching such an act take place reminded Dokja of a line he had once read. In order to conceal the true identity of the person responsible for killing the prisoner, multiple executioners would simultaneously pull their levers. When the beating of the old lady was over, no one would know who had taken her life. It was as if he was reading the novel. Everyone else was in a different world and he was just a spectator. If he meddled in the story, would there be anything left for him to work with? But a part of him told him it was wrong to just stand by and watch. Sangha, on the other hand, was willing to risk it all to do what was right. As he held her back, he realized that some people were just destined to shine, no matter where they were. It didn't matter what genre they were in, they would step up to the plate. But none of that mattered because Dokjin knew that Sangha was not the heroine of this world. He couldn't let her casually throw away her life. This only forced him to accelerate his plan. If things didn't work out perfectly, today could very well be his last. The reason he didn't interfere wasn't because he was afraid of the edgelord. He didn't even condone their savage ways. He was simply just waiting for the right moment. And luckily, that right moment was now. As an explosion went off in the train car, he rushed forward. The explosion caused by the web novel's protagonist in 3707 was going to give him the opening he needed to chart his way into the future. In the midst of the confusion, he rushed towards the edgelord. Tackling him, putting everything he had behind it. He sent his enemy flying, crashing into the opposite end of the train. As the smoke and flames eased back into the conjoining compartment, the edgelord jumped up, infuriated by the attack. To the outside observer, his attack was merely a ruse to protect the little old lady. But that wasn't his only objective. When everybody was reeling to figure out what was going on, he was searching for the key piece he needed to force his survival. He spotted it resting in a little boy's hand. He patted the little boy on his shoulder and removed the precious items from his possession. But he was not heartless, and he paid his debts. He placed a single item in the boy's hand and encouraged him to hold on to it tight. With that, he had everything he needed to enact the main body of his plan. He stood up tall and made an announcement to the entire train car. He explained to them that killing the little old lady did not ensure any of them their lives. His words did the trick as he gained the attention of everyone. If you kill her, then what next? All you'll have done was bought yourself 5 minutes. None of you are looking at the bigger picture. In order for anyone to survive this, we each need to take the life of a single individual. So after you take the little old lady out, who's next? Will it be the person standing next to you? The edgelord smiled. He had known fully what it took to survive from the very beginning. He insisted losers like Dokja would be the first to go. Because after all, from the very beginning, everyone's chances were 50-50. Doctor smiled, for the edgelord had laid a precious gift in his lap. He insisted there was no reason for anyone to gamble with their lives. From the very beginning, there existed a method to survive without becoming a murderer. Where in the scenario does it say that we have to kill a human being? As he held up a cricket, he explained that the scenario had only stated they needed to kill a living organism. As he stood at the end of the train car with a container full of crickets, all of the madness that each of them still possessed came hurtling towards him. He couldn't explain why his heart beat with joy at this perilous situation. Why was he smiling? He wondered if he was always this type of person. As the crowd barreled toward him, he smashed his cricket in the palm of his hand, ensuring his future. He launched the container of crickets into the air, drawing all their attention away from him. The first kill mission has been accomplished. You will receive 100 coins as a bonus. The desperate passengers searched all over for the insects, even if the reality was that the few people who would survive from such a method had already snatched them out of the air. His orchestrated plan hadn't eaten up nearly as much time as he needed. There were still over 3 minutes left on the clock. The edgelord could not understand why Dokja hadn't just handed him the container of bugs. So Dokja informed him of a shocking reality. There had only been 3 insects in the box. This only excited the edgelord, as he assumed he had found a kindred soul. There was no reason for Dokja to hide his true intent any longer. The edgelord knew that only a malicious person would put on such a show just to watch the puny humans fight for their lives. Dokja knew Namwon Kim very well. He was the type of person who relished in such situations. Personal skill. Character profile activated. Character profile. Name: Namwon Kim. Age: 19. Supporting constellations? None. 2 constellations are currently interested in this individual. Personal attributes: edgelord generic. Personal skills: exceptional adaptability level 3. Knife fighting level 1. Grimdark awakening level 1. Overall stats: stamina level 3. Strength level 4. Agility level 6. Mana level 4. General evaluation: a teenage edgelord whose dark side has awakened due to an extraneous event. It's best not to get involved with him. Character profiles. Dokja was starting to see how his attributes worked. Namwon Kim was much different than other edgelords. Most of them would have committed suicide the moment the horrifying event started. Delusional demon. Namwon Kim edgelord. All his life he had longed for an apocalypse just like this, allowing him to adapt to this world at an unusual speed. Namwon Kim offered his hand to Dokja. He felt the two would make perfect teammates. Namwon Kim has expressed interest in you. Your understanding of Namwon Kim has increased. Dokja knew it wasn't a compliment that Namwon Kim wanted to join forces. Cabin 3707 was a totally different environment where only one human reigned supreme. The atmosphere in cabin 3807 was chaotic but peaceful in comparison. All the passengers searched in vain for insects they would never find. Dokja worked alone. He had no interest in teaming up with the psychopath. If he hadn't read TSWA, he might have accepted the safety that came with such an offer. But being the reader, he knew the edgelord's future, and after meeting him in person it was a no-go. And as quickly as Namwon Kim showed interest, it was gone. He had no time for things that didn't concern him. He had an old lady he needed to take care of. He couldn't just let that bug slip between his fingers. Dokja grabbed his hand as he walked by. He wasn't going to allow that to happen. The edgelord was confused. He didn't know if he was dealing with someone with a hero complex or a split personality. But it was simply that Dokja had come to the realization that he hated Namwon Kim's character in both TWSA and in real life. The edgelord was sick of this do-gooder. Namwon Kim despises you. Your affinity towards Namwon Kim has slightly decreased. The edgelord took a sneaky swing towards Dokja's face. He was impressed with the do-gooder's ability to dodge. But the reality was Dokja just knew him in and out. He took the full brunt of the next attack, having no time to dodge. Doctor was put on edge as the blow he received was most definitely a skill. Skill Gridlock Awakening Level 1. He had no idea how the edgelord had even figured out he had skills, let alone awakened one. After realizing what he was capable of, the edgelord was throwing killing blows with each attack. He was high on the power that made him so strong. This strength would explain why TWSA's protagonist allowed the edgelord to join his team. Your understanding of Namwon Kim has increased. You have unlocked level 1 of your personal skill Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Doctor was surprised. He had never come across this skill in TWSA. The passengers were starting to panic. The bugs that they hoped would be their salvation were nowhere to be found. Doctor ducked away from a fearsome blow thrown in his direction, and easily sidestepped the follow-up to that attack. He was starting to get furious as he threw a guaranteed uppercut. He screamed out in rage at his frustration. Doctor taunted him. As it stood, the kid would never be able to touch him. Level 1 of Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint activated. Right shoulder. He dodged to the left, letting the blow harmlessly pass right by him. In the face. He fell backwards, feeling the swoosh as the blow barely missed his face. As soon as he activated his second skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, he knew exactly what was going to happen all around him. The edgelord was in a full rage. What was the point of such power if he couldn't land a blow on his enemy? Doctor had no ability to retaliate in any way. He had to focus on holding out just a little longer. The stupid system just had to pop up a 2-minute warning for everyone. When given lemons, you have to make lemonade, so he announced the obvious to his enemy. You only have 2 minutes left, kid. But his strategy backfired as Namwon Kim focused on his original target, the old lady. All Namwon Kim needed to do was kill the little old lady, and he would make it to the next scenario. No matter what happened, Daksha had to take this psychopath out of the equation here and now. As things were getting serious, Namwon Kim reached for his knife. Reading about a person for over a decade gave you unrestricted insight into a person's psyche like you would never believe. Heart. Skill. Knife Fighting Level 1. The edgelord was playing for keeps as his attack aimed for the old lady's heart missed, and his knife slammed into the ground. Doctor yanked the little old lady up. He had to protect her life regardless of the outcome. Saving the lady's life had caused him to take his first injury to the shoulder. The skill the edgelord used burned his skin with an unnatural fire. He had forgotten that this kid was a military geek. Such information was only going to make it harder for him to accomplish his goal. He picked up the little old lady and struggled away, knowing that death was only a breath away. If he lost to Namwon Kim, his death was assured. In this world, everything was based on survival of the fittest. But he realized it wasn't just this world. According to the law of the jungle, the strong prey on the weak. Nothing had changed, it was just that the rule had become clearer. If he was going to survive, he would have to believe it and live by it. Namwon Kim insisted he should just give up. He barely had the energy to walk anymore. Time was running out, and they needed to get this over with one way or another. It was all coming to a head. If he hesitated, he would die. Daksha asked the high schooler if insect eggs also counted as organism. But the edgelord couldn't wrap his mind around the nonsense he was hearing. But the answer to Daksha's question was a simple yes. As he crushed the cluster of cricket eggs, his system exploded. You have killed a living organism. You have attained 100 bonus coins, popped up for every egg that was destroyed. Namwon Kim had no idea how he was supposed to know the answer to such a useless question. You have attained a large amount of coins. Would you like a tutorial on coin usage? Daksha ordered the system to skip the tutorial. He wanted to invest 2,700 coins into his stamina. Investing 2,700 coins in stamina. Stamina level 1 has increased to stamina level 10. Stamina level has been considerably enhanced. Your physical durability has greatly increased. He completed his transition right as the edgelord's knife made contact with his chest, doing no damage in the process. The edgelord, realizing what he was up against, dashed away for his own safety. During the mating season, crickets can lay as many as 100 eggs. And I'm not the one who's going to die. You are. As the clock ticked down, there was less than 60 seconds remaining. The former edgelord fought with all his might to survive. The desperation could clearly be seen in his eyes as the clock slowly ticked down to 0. Your time has run out, proceeding with checkout. Namwon Kim's death wasn't quick or painless. Main scenario number 1: prove your value has ended. Number of survivors in cabin number 3807 of train number 3434 to Bulgwang, 5. Now this is fascinating. What in the world happened in here? I was only gone for a minute. But look at this mess. The Dakibi spent around and cast a spell, cleaning away all the remains and leaving only the 5 survivors. The only thing that remained that showed the full horror of what had happened in the train car were the blood stains that were left behind. The 5 passengers stared on, anticipating nothing but bad news from the Dakibi. The survivors of the first main scenario were Hyun Seong Lee, the army lieutenant, Sangayu, the promising co-worker, Gileon Lee, the supplier of crickets, Myung-go Han, the sleazy businessman with morals, and our protagonist, Dr. Kim, the reader. Dr. was having slightly traumatic flashbacks of what had just happened. In the final seconds, the edgelord had begged him for his life. But Dr. had only used his own words against him. What he wanted were all remnants of the old world. And after all, a new world needed new rules. But he begged right up to the very end. Dr. could not do him the dishonor of looking away. All this scenario taught him was that the edgelord was right the whole time. He was just like him. He could have saved each of those people. But he simply chose not to. He'd be lying if he didn't say he felt guilty. As he stared at himself in the mirror, he thought it was very strange that he remained so calm. None of this felt real to him. He was still just an observer reading a novel. You slaughter 124 living organisms. Slaughter details: 1 grasshopper and 123 grasshopper eggs. Due to killing non-resistant organisms, the number of coins you obtain has been halved. You have attained 6,200 coins. The coins you use to level up your stats will be deducted. You have attained 3,500 coins. You have unlocked the achievement Decimator due to excessive slaughter. You have obtained 300 coins as a basic clear reward. 100 coins have been deducted for the channel usage fee. Additional rewards will be calculated. As all this was taking place, the train began to move again. When they burst into the sunlight, the world had undergone a drastic change. None of this was a surprise to Dokja. After all, he was the reader who knew the ending to all of this. As the survivors stared out the windows, they knew they weren't going home anytime soon. The Dakibi found it all simply fascinating. Giant hydra-like creatures were loitering on either side of the bridge. The businessman was beginning to panic as the train came to a sudden rest. The giant snakes were called ichthyosaur, but they were more commonly known as sea serpents. In TWSA, as the world became accustomed to its new environment, the creatures were officially classified as Grade 7 monsters. In the story, the scenarios came above everything else. Because of this, you would rarely get attacked by something outside of the scenarios. They had nothing to fear from the giant creatures. They were safe for the time being. The Dakibi was just dying of happiness as he counted each and every star he could see in his nebulous. Dokja counted 21 stars. The number of stars signified the number of constellations that had viewed the Dakibi's channel. Constellations are the most mysterious beings in TWSA and the masterminds behind this tragedy. They live-streamed the scenarios from across the universe. In other words, they are the true viewers of the Dakibi's channels. For a newbie Dakibi, 21 viewers was a large amount. Dokja had changed the course of the story to who knows what effect. In the original story, Namwon Kim had killed almost everyone in their cabin. Due to the death of Namwon Kim, 2 constellations feel slightly hostile towards you. The change he made in the story was likely the cause of the error he was receiving. Due to an unexpected scenario inspection, your payment is being delayed. Please wait a moment. He knew the true beginning of the story started when the constellations made their preferences. As he waited for his rewards to be delivered, he slyly pocketed the edgelord's knife. Dokja made a great observation. Only yesterday he was in their position. But now they were the ones watching him. A few constellations are impressed with your scenario. The constellations have gifted you 500 coins. He expected this to happen. If there were constellations that hated him, there was also constellations who viewed him in a favorable light. Those constellations would be his supporters. He hoped all of them enjoyed the show. Because sooner or later they would be the ones paying the admission fee with their lives. Sangha was worried for Dokja. But he was entirely fine. When she approached him, he immediately apologized for failing to save the old lady's life. But she was more worried about how calm he was. But instead of pushing it, she thanked him for what he had done for her earlier. A cricket flew right into her hands, allowing her to survive. He immediately burst her bubble, explaining it was only a coincidence, and she shouldn't expect it to happen again. He didn't know what she had on her mind, but he knew she was smart, so she would understand his words exactly. Because of his choice, some had lived and others had died. He didn't deserve gratitude from anyone. The Dakibi had an audience to perform to, so he wasted no time getting to work. Well, so did all of you prove your worth. I see many of you survived. Oh my, thank you for those sponsorships, dear constellations. I can't believe there are 21 of you watching my channel. Dokja was surprised that so many of them had survived. Other than Lieutenant Lee, he hadn't had much expectations. He didn't know whether it was a blessing or a curse that he had allowed the young Gillian Lee to move forward in this new chaotic world. If he was going to survive, he would have to do more than stand around and watch. Dokja felt it was only right that he helped the young Lee down that path. He rested his hand on the kid's shoulder and asked him if he wanted to live. What he was doing wasn't sympathy. If he had to put a word to it, he would call it hypocrisy. The kid agreed, so the two of them would officially team up. A few constellations are impressed with your good deed. The constellations have gifted you with 200 coins. At best he was a hypocrite. But he would do anything to survive. And if that meant putting on a show, he would put on the show. He knew without the constellation support, everything would be difficult. So he needed to sway as many to his side as he could. A lot of interesting things happened today. The guy in the next cabin was also a total nutcase. The businessman still haven't learned to keep his mouth shut. Since they had completed their tests, it was only fair that they be let go. All Dokja could say about Mr. Myango Han was that he was one lucky guy. As he enraged the Dakibi, Dokja wondered why he was on the subway in the first place. He spent all his time bragging about his wealth. And recently he had purchased a new Mercedes. Let you go? Haven't you seen what's going on outside? Are you sure you want me to let you go? As if triggered, the sea serpent let his presence be known. The sleazy businessman instantly realized his mistake and slinked back into the shadows. Anyways, I'm impressed. I didn't have any expectations for this cabin, but you all survived the first scenario. You have proven that even bugs deserve to survive. It was fitting that the lot of them were nothing more than crickets to the Dakibi. Of course, every hardship deserves a reward, and the reward for the first scenario is that you are now qualified to be sponsored by constellations. Isn't it so exciting? What? None of you seem excited at all? This is a pretty big deal, you know. Dokja knew that none of them had any idea what a constellation sponsor was. Let me break this down for you. Right now, all of you are so weak it's laughable. If we let any of you move on to the next stage in your condition, you will be killed by any old weak creature. And that's where the constellations come in. They are great beings that pity you and wish to shower you with their blessings. Do you understand? But his explanation did nothing to clear up the situation for any of them. I can't believe I'm stuck with such a hopeless bunch. I'm not going to explain it all over again. You will just have to figure it out as you go. He snapped his fingers and each of them was given their very own set of options to go over. Sponsor selection. Select a constellation. The selected constellation will be your reliable sponsor. 1 abyssal black flying dragon. 2 demonic judge of fire. 3. Secretive plotter. 4. Prisoner of the golden headband. As Doctor perused his 4 options, Senga inquired about what she should do. She had received 2 strange options. He couldn't let on that he knew anything. The best he could do for her was to casually guide her into believing it was an aptitude test. For her to receive 2 sponsorships was entirely lucky also. Selecting your sponsor was one of the main events of TWSA. The sponsor selection is a system on which the constellations who watch us through the Dakibi's channels choose a human they like as their vessel and sponsor them. And for Doctor, 4 constellations wanted to sponsor him as their vessel. The original protagonist of the story had received 5 options, so receiving 4 was very good. He was in luck, for his prior knowledge of the world would guide him greatly. The constellations never revealed their name. You could typically deduce their activities through the nicknames themselves. Being the reader, he shouldn't have a problem at all. First, there was the abyssal black flame dragon. He was the powerful leader of the constellation group Black Cloud. Even if he knew this guy's true name, it would probably be impossible for him to even recite it. He gave any of his vessels an additional boost to their power level. Stamina and strength are both a vital part of the earlier scenarios. Because of this, he wouldn't be a bad choice to choose. But the benefits you received ended there. And the negatives far outweighed any positives. The more you use this constellation's power, the more insane you would become, till you were nothing more than a psychopathic killer. Doctor had no idea why this constellation was interested in him, as it only chose edgelord characters. In fact, this was the very constellation who had chosen Namwon Kim in the novel. Doctor wasn't too sure about this one, so he put it on the back burner. He was surprised to see the next one on his list. Demonic Judge of Fire. You'll be surprised to find that this constellation isn't a demon. The words fire and judge only indicate that she uses fire and judges demons. The constellation is none other than Archangel Uriel. She isn't a bad choice, but constellations of absolute good have their drawbacks. The restrictions she would impose upon him would be stifling in the least. His third choice was Secretive Plotter. With all the hours he had into TWSA, he truly just didn't recognize this one. It couldn't be any of the real powerful constellations. Either it was glanced over in the story or it was never mentioned, but he doubted it was one of the truly powerful constellations. So he moved on to his last choice. His heart thudded at the sight of the name alone. He was shocked that this constellation had made an offer so early in the game. Prisoner of the Golden Headband. You could mistake this constellation as negative, with the name Prisoner prominently displayed. But the proper noun is Golden Headband. Bound to the smallest prison in the world, the owner of Mount Hongju, who lives with the pain of the binding head shackle. The handsome monkey king with the golden gaze and fury eyes. The great sage, heaven's equal Sun Wukong. A single swipe of his staff could crush hundreds of vessels. And one of his lightning bolts could eradicate thousands of monsters. The very passage where the author showed his true strength was seared into Doctor's brain. If he chose the great sage of heaven's equal as his sponsor, could he have a chance against the monster in 3707? The sponsor selection has ended. Okay everyone, are you done? Wow, someone has made a very interesting choice. Don't worry, there will be many more opportunities to come. Well, now that you all selected your sponsors, we'll be taking a short break. I have a few things to prepare for the next scenario. I'll see all of you in 10 minutes. Doctor invited them all to gather around. Lieutenant Lee wasted no time introducing himself. Doctor assumed he was a lieutenant in title only now, seeing as how the army is most likely scattered to the wind. His grip alone reminded Doctor that Hyan Seong Lee was a tank in the early stages of TWSA. He wanted to thank Doctor for allowing him to move forward with a clean conscience. If it wasn't for your actions, I would either be dead or someone I couldn't bear to look at. With those words, Doctor knew he needed to recruit Hyan Seong Lee. The shady businessman chose that moment to make his appearance. His words were an obvious attempt to prop himself up. He was sure Doctor knew exactly who he was. You're Myeon Gohan, but he insisted that wasn't his proper title. and that he should be referred to as Mr. Han. Myung-go Han went off on a full tangent. So, you're just not going to come to work anymore? When did you gain such bad manners? Truthfully, I'm offended by the stunt you pulled back there. If you had bugs that whole time, you should have told me in the beginning. And you dared toss them in the air like I'm some trash? Please, Myung-go Han, just shut up. Dokja was starting to believe he should have just let that punk hit this fool. Maybe then he would have understood the situation everyone was in. That company didn't exist anymore. And he wasn't the only one that needed a wake-up call. All of you need to understand that this isn't a joke. A game-like interface. Attribute windows and skills. By now, no one should be confused by this. Each of their blank stares told him all he needed to know. This group was hopeless. Hyan Seong-lee wasn't sure this was real. He was still holding out on the fact that it could all be just a dream. But he was thankful that Dokja at least was certain what was going on. And he looked to him to lead them forward. Hyan Seong-lee has started to trust you. Your understanding of Hyan Seong-lee has increased. Dokja was adamant that they needed to escape this train immediately. Everyone except for Little Lee was stunned stupid by this. The sea serpent chose the perfect time to reinforce their fears. A wall of concern flooded towards him. Even Hyan Seong-lee was against it, and of all the people here, Dokja needed him by his side. The passenger in 3707 was doing a good job making his case for him. They all turned to the door being forced in, fire blazing around its edges. If the Dakibi wasn't the one causing all the commotion, it meant that the person on the other side of the door was the sole survivor of subway cabin 3707. And to Dokja, it was quite obvious who that was. The true protagonist of the story was coming. And if they didn't find the exit, none of them would be making it to the next scenario. Hyan Seong-lee was hesitant. There was no way to be sure that the person on the other side of that door was their enemy. Dokja explained he knew all he needed to know about that person. He was the survivor who had killed all the people in his cabin. Are you sure you still want to meet him? Hyan Seong-lee understood, and immediately began looking for the way out. Every door they came across was either broken or sealed shut. Luckily, the invisible force field was nowhere to be seen. If they were able to find a working door, they could escape. With only 3 doors remaining, their chances were dwindling. Within a matter of minutes, a devastating force would be upon them. To all their relief, Sangha found a door that was ajar. But upon closer examination, it too was broken. Dokja was sure it was still their best chance of escape. He was hesitant to increase his strength using his coins. He couldn't count on it always being his saving grace. Hyan Seong-lee had a skill that would be perfect for this situation. Personal skill character profile activated. Name: Hyan Seong-lee. Age: 28. Supporting constellation: Master of Steel. Personal attribute: Soldier who turned a blind eye to injustice. Personal skills: Bayonet level 2. Camo level 2. Patience level 2. Stigma, Great Mountain Push level 1. Overall stats: Stamina level 8, Strength level 8, Agility level 7, Mana level 5. General evaluation: Hyan Seong-lee has very good overall stats. Although how readily he turned a blind eye to injustice was surprising. Although a constellation still accepted him, leading to him having future opportunities to prove himself. Dokja was in luck that he was still walking the same path he did in the novel. He made the excuse that he was sure that someone in the army would have skills that will be useful at this very moment. Hyan Seong-lee was unsure how all this worked, so Dokja suggested he just imagine himself using it. Seeing as how he trusted Dokja's insight, he gave it a shot. Hyan Seong-lee roared with everything he had. As a green aura enveloped him, he forced the doors open. He was like a kid in a candy store. He couldn't believe it had really worked. Hyan Seong-lee has begun to trust you. Your understanding of Hyan Seong-lee has increased. Dokja was relieved that the Stigma Great Mountain Push had successfully activated. It really saved him from having to waste more coins at such an early stage. They needed to move, The door holding back the beasts in cabin 3707 wouldn't hold for long. But if Dokja's memory was accurate, the steel door wasn't their problem. The Dakibi appeared in their path, the sun casting him into darkness. Gosh, I knew this would happen. I told you earlier to stay put. I haven't finished preparing the next scenario. The loud mouth in the back knew this was going to happen. Well, I guess I have no choice. All of you have no idea how lucky you are. The Dakibi snapped his finger and began the second scenario. The second scenario has arrived. None of them wasted time examining the tasks that lay before them. Scenario: Escape from the collapsed bridge. Category: Sub. Difficulty: E. Clear conditions. Successfully cross the collapsed bridge and enter Oxa Station within 20 minutes. Reward: 200 coins. Failure penalty: consequences unknown. In this sub-scenario, your task is to escape from a dangerous situation involving a collapsed bridge. Your primary objective is to make your way across the bridge and reach Oxa Station within a time limit of 20 minutes. The completion of this mission will reward you with 200 coins. However, the penalty for failing to meet the objectives is currently undisclosed. Dokja was the first to make a break for it. While the others wasted time trying to make sense of it all, he screamed at them to run. They had to take advantage of their good luck. Because they forced the scenario's hand and escaped the train early, the bridge was still intact. There was no doubt about it, the bridge would soon collapse. It might seem like they were cheating, or at best being underhanded. But in TWSA it was literally impossible to clear any of the scenarios without finding a way around the rules. They were cutting it close, but if everything went in their favor, they would make it. But as a giant whirlpool appeared before their eyes, it looked like their luck had finally ran out. A sea serpent shot forth, and judging by its size, it was of the commander level. It had only one job to do, and it wasted no time accomplishing it. They had to move. If they were fast enough, they could just still make it. The sea commander had no interest in them. The bridge was its target. Seeing as how they were ruining all the fun, the Dakibi decided to intervene. What fun is a game that's too easy? He dropped down from the sky to their level. Let's shake things up a bit. Who wants to watch you escape without a challenge? The difficulty of the scenario has been adjusted. Difficulty adjusted from E to D. The evil thoughts of the dead have returned. Black ether is rising from the surrounding earth. All the passengers on the train became the walking dead. Sangha, noticing this, screamed, "Zombies! Demonic beings have been resurrected." Hyan Seung Lee, carrying little Lee, hadn't paused in his escape, and had made it to the station safely. You have entered Oxa Station. But the rest of the team was trapped on both sides. Dokja, seeing what was coming, ordered everyone to get down. The sea commander fulfilled its purpose, and removed their ability to escape. As the destruction the sea commander caused cleared, Dokja realized the extent of their plight. The giant sea serpent had did what he had come to do and left in a spectacular fashion. Dokja knew this was going to happen, but he was surprised that everyone had survived. He was thankful the two people he was most interested in forming a team with had made it safely to the other side. As he stared on, a miracle was taking place before his very eyes. Someone has received the blessing of a constellation. A flash of light was forming at the edge of the bridge. The constellation's blessing has activated Deus Ex Machina in this scenario. A full bridge of light had formed across the gap. Deus Ex Machina, bridge of even numbers. A bridge of light created by the blessing of a constellation can be crossed only by an even number of people. The bridge will collapse if an odd number of people attempt to cross it. Dokja stared on, shocked, as Sangha was seeing visions before her eyes. Deus Ex Machina. A power that lets a constellation directly intervene in the scenario at a great cost. He couldn't believe Sangha had a supporting constellation that was willing to intervene for her so early in the game. Such interventions were super rare in TWSA. His curiosity was officially piqued. He needed to know exactly what constellation she had chosen. She was so head over heels over him. All he needed to do was ask, and she would tell him. Activate character profile. This person's profile cannot be browsed using character profile. This character does not have a registered character profile. He had no idea what was stopping him from viewing her profile. Was her constellation that special? Or did she have a mental barrier skill? There was no way she had developed such a skill already. Senga screamed behind you, warning Dokja of the imminent zombie attack. He countered its blow, drop-kicking it as far away from him as he could. If he wasn't careful, his inattentiveness would get him killed. Tier 9 Humanoid Demon. A mutant species infected by the black ether. Once a normal human, these humanoid demons were essentially zombies. They were only dangerous if the original human was truly powerful. And of all people, it just had to be him. Personal skill Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint activated. This character does not possess a consciousness. Deactivating Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Dokja had a feeling it wasn't going to work, but it never hurt to try. His only choice going forward was to get across the bridge as soon as possible. But the rules of Deus Ex Machina was going to make that impossible. One of the three of them would have to stay behind and die. And the shady businessman wasn't planning on being that person. He snatched up his unwilling ticket to freedom and rushed to safety as Senga screamed Dokja's name. Dokja stood there, shocked at the play Myango Han was making. The constellation, the secretive plotter, is impressed by your foolishness. The constellation, the demonic judge of fire, is touched by your selflessness. You have been gifted 100 coins. As the two sped away, Dokja tried his ability once again. The person's profile cannot be browsed using character profile. If he wasn't mistaken, the stigma Myango Han was using was one-legged swift foot. It belonged to the constellation Leaping Trickster. The Leaping Trickster constellation doesn't have the ability to bless mental barrier stigma on its vessels. Stigma. A special power endowed to vessels by their constellation. So this left a simple reason why his skill wasn't working. He felt so stupid that he didn't figure it out earlier. But neither of them were original characters of the game TWSA. As he stood there, daydreaming, the zombies had regrouped and made it to his destination. He knew there was a way out of this situation. He just needed to think. He wondered if crossing the bridge with a demon could be the answer to his problem. The chance of that working was so unlikely he wondered if he should even attempt it. With the time ticking out, what choices did he have? The scenario was set to end in less than 15 minutes. Hey survivor, you're doing pretty good. Keep it up. Are there any constellations out there who wishes to bless this poor vessel? Oh my, look at that. Nobody's interested. How unfortunate. While the Dakibi was having his fun, Dokja was busy handling the zombies attacking him from all directions. If he didn't do something soon, his body was going to give out. No matter how hard he tried, the zombies were increasingly pushing him to the edge of the bridge. His lack of combat skills was a giant handicap it seemed he would never overcome. If he only had one, he wouldn't be having such a hard time. With his desperation at his highest, he received a new skill. Personal skill bookmark activated. A giant book fluttered above his head. He had never heard of such a skill, in all the time he read TWSA. Activating character bookmarks. Available bookmark slots 3. Loading the list of bookmarks that can be activated. List of bookmarked characters. 1. Delusional Demon Namwon Kim, Understanding 25. 2. Steel Blade. Hyeon Seong Lee, Understanding 35. 3. Empty Slot. In over 3,000 episodes of TWSA, he had never once come across this ability. The Undead Edgelord was primed and ready to finish Dokja's life. But instinctively Dokja knew exactly how it worked. He activated bookmark number 1. The past events of the Edgelord's life fluttered past his eyes. Activating bookmark number 1. The activation time has been shortened due to the low level of the bookmark skill. Activation time, 1 minute. Your understanding of the character is low, so the character skills were only partially activated. Activating Grimlock Awakening Level 1. The bookmark skill was a copy ability that would allow him the combat skills he needed to survive this encounter. A silhouette of his former enemy appeared around him as he proceeded to easily destroy the zombie. To be forced to relive your death in such a horrible way twice was just too cruel. But luckily this time around it was much quicker than it originally had been. Doctor stared on, radiating in the power that he gained from becoming the Edge Lord. Your understanding of Namwon Kim has increased. Deactivating bookmark number 1. Scenario: Escape from the collapsed bridge. Category Sub. Difficulty E. Clear conditions. Successfully cross the collapsed bridge and enter Oxa Station within 20 minutes. Reward: 200 coins. Failure penalty: consequences unknown. Time remaining 10 minutes and 11 seconds. His new skill was really effective, but it took a toll on his body, leaving him exhausted. A certain individual was late to the show. But Dokja knew that this was about the time he finally showed his face. As a horde of zombies limbered towards him, a giant explosion erupted from the direction of the train. The zombie's attention was drawn to a character draped in all black. It had been a long ride, but he had finally arrived. Thank you all for sticking in there to the end. If you're interested in a part 2, please leave a comment down below. It was such a great ride that I'm pretty sure I could be convinced to do one. If you can't wait for a part 2. The name of this is Omniscient Reader, and there's well over 160 chapters. So make sure to support the original author. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.